Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Sheli, the Educational Initiative Director from the Meaningful Life Center, and I have with me two wonderful ladies today, Michal Oshman and Sara Blau. Michal Oshman is the head of company culture, diversity, and inclusion at Tik Tok Europe, Middle East, and Africa. She was formerly responsible for international leadership at Facebook, and she has trained hundreds of tech leaders. Michal is very accomplished. She lives in the UK with her family and 4 children, and she's the author of the book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? I also have Sara Blau with me, which is an amazing educator, also a close friend, and she is super busy. She is the author of almost, I think, more than 20 children. She is also now the author of the book Close to You, which was published by the Meaningful Life Center. And it's a pleasure having both of you here today. And we would love to discuss your amazing books. So
I had no idea about the 20 books.
I'm sure there's plenty about you that I'll find out too, right?
Okay, but Sheli, can you share the most recent Sara book just with us? I know do you have a handy copy to share?
Yes, I actually do. We have the book Close to You. It's based on the book of Tanya, and it's basically short meditations. It explains to you how to have a more meaningful day, a more meaningful life. And Sara can give us some more information about that. And your book is also about spirituality and how to enhance your life and not to be afraid to take on initiatives and to be the best version of you.
And can you whip out Michal's book?
Don't worry about that. I wanted to see Sara's books because I didn't get a chance to get a hard copy yet.
Okay, ladies, so let's not postpone this amazing talk. So Michal, can you tell us a little bit about your book, the title? Everyone is always talking about the title. What would you do if you wouldn't be afraid? So can you tell us why you chose this title, a little bit behind the story?
So what would you do if you weren't afraid is actually an internal Facebook mantra, I would say, or value. And when I joined Facebook, probably 8-10 years ago, now I'm with a different company, but when I joined Facebook, I was fascinated of kind of seeing these big posters on the wall inviting us employees not to be afraid. And I thought that was fascinating how the company was recognizing, almost embracing the fact that we all are afraid. But if we continue to be afraid, we won't be able to unleash our potential. We won't be able to be the full, fantastic versions of ourselves. And the company welcomed this invitation of people to overcome their fear and to think about what would they do if they weren't afraid. And just side by side to these posters of what would you do if you weren't afraid were posters that said, fail harder. So again, this was kind of a recognition that often we don't do things because we're afraid of failure. So that is what I loved so much about this super powerful question that we could ask ourselves, what would we do if we weren't afraid? And I was afraid for most of my life. So what I share in my book and in my personal, journey is that I suffered from anxiety for many years. And we don't have to go into detail about it today. I tried everything I knew that was out there, like talking therapy and medication, and it helped me to a certain degree to raise my self-awareness, but it didn't help me heal. And it was only at the age of 38, which was almost a decade ago, that I made a huge discovery. And I shared that discovery in the book.
Wow, that's amazing. Sara, your book is it's based on the Tanya, and it's also based on, I guess, the needs of women in the modern world. Can you explain to us also a little bit like what was behind your book?
Sure. So the book is called Close to You. Sometimes you see pictures in glossy magazines or online of food that looks amazing and really complicated to make. And then you watch a cooking show and you're like, oh, I could do that. Like we just had a cooking class last night with Mrs. Gitti Rappaport, and she showed how to make gravlax. And when you watch it and it's broken down for you and it's in steps, you're like, oh, I could do that. So when the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, it was based on this pasuk, this verse in the Torah that says, it's close to you. You can do it. It's not just it's close to you, it's very close to you to serve God, right? And in your Beficha with your mouth, ubelvavcha with your heart, la'asai to do it. And the obvious question is, how is it easy and close to serve God with your heart? Like to be emotionally motivated and passionate and to love God. It seems so spiritual. And yet in the Tanya, it's broken down. Here's the step, how to make gravlax. This is, you do this, this, this. The challenge is, the Tanya is in Hebrew. It has a lot of esoteric concepts. It's long, you have to learn it. I was like, oh, let's write a book to make close to you, close to you. And so I took each chapter of the Tanya and broke it down with a Tanya bit at the end, in short and in an easy to understand manner, so that when you get it in bite size, you really feel and you're like, oh, I could generate these positive, healthy, godly emotions, and it's relevant, it's realistic. You don't have to be a certain type to do it. If you're, if you follow the recipe, you'll get the results.
It's truly amazing because I did look at your book and I still look at it many times, and it's something that you have to read over and over. And it really is true that you brought it down to a level that you can really apply it. You can really say, okay, I can really do this. And I think it's amazing. It's the both of your books are just you're taking on such a big topic and you're really making it like reachable and people can really kind of like use it in their everyday life, and I think that's very, very special and very important. And Michal, in your when everyone looks at you, and I've seen many of your talks, like you're such an amazing person, you're very humble, you juggle so much, you wear so many hats. And there you go, you bring us this book that, about things that are so, I guess, even personal and your fears and anxiety and things that you had to work through, and you're bringing it to us with a real solution. And can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, the spiritual process that got you to bring on this amazing piece of work to us?
Thank you. The book is very personal, and I really did open up there, not because I wanted to. I'm actually quite a private person, preference, I guess. But I realized that in order to get people to trust you and to be wanting to hear, from you, I also need to, share and open up and put myself out there. So in the book, I share experiences from my marriage life, how this guy that I was madly in love with left me on the day that I thought he was going to propose. That is not my current husband, of course. Thank God. And, I share about dialogue that I have with my children. I share about my ever-evolving relationship with my parents. I do open up. And I think what I learned, so my discovery is that there is a Jewish wisdom. And I grew up in Tel Aviv in I would say a Jewish family. Of course, I was very clear about my heritage and my identity, but it, to be honest, didn't mean that much to me. We were kind of a secular North Tel Aviv, celebrating holidays mainly for great food and getting together, which is fantastic.
Yeah, not bad.
Not bad. It's a good starting point. But I had no idea that there is a Jewish psychology within the Torah. And I don't even like using the term Jewish psychology, because psychology is a much later term to, looking after our soul and helping our soul grow and evolve. But that's the best way to define what we actually have in the Torah, which is ideas and principles to how to overcome daily challenges. And, often I think about how fascinating it is that we look at ourselves today and we say, oh, anxiety is a new phenomenon. Jealousy and comparing to others is something new. No, people have been feeling these challenging feelings for thousands of years, and it didn't start from Sigmund Freud. So why are we only looking at 300 years or 200 years back studying psychology or psychotherapy? Maybe we should go back and look at the first, I guess, writing and wisdom on how to heal and how to grow. So I opened up in the book because I wanted to share with people that I've actually tried lots of things. And then once, just before I became 40, I was exposed to Jewish wisdom and to Chassidut and to Lubavitcher teaching. I said, oh my gosh, why did no one tell me about this?
Wow.
But no one, but things happen exactly the way they should.
Interesting, Michal. Sheli phrased the question of on the one hand, you're this successful female executive, and on the other hand, you have these struggles. But the truth is, what your book and what the Tanya does is normalize the struggle and say, earth to everybody. You know, we all have internal struggles and demons, and it's so healing and healthy to recognize I have a godly soul and I have an animal soul. So what people often do is they look at other people on social media and go, oh, she's successful, but do you know what I have? Do you know which issues? And there's all this shame and like, you know, and what are we doing? We're comparing our inner struggles with her success. When in reality, we all have the external and then we have the inside story. And it's normal. It's not like a mic drop moment that I have this big secret, I struggle. If you're a person, you struggle, you know, and each of us have individuals, you know, individual challenges. Yours might be anxiety, somebody else might be, you know, depressive thoughts. And like you said, somebody might be jealous, but to normalize the fact that it's not a contradiction. It's not hypocrisy to on the outside be successful and on the inside struggle. That is the nature. You mentioned Jewish psychology. The nature of our internal landscape is, you know, animal soul, godly soul, the ability to overcome it. It's so empowering. It normalizes it for everybody. No shame.
It's so true. I actually, looking at your book, I was like, wow, she's really dealing with all the things that we're thinking about. It was interesting that it wasn't just like the, you know, beautifying everything. It was actually saying, I am scared, I'm ashamed, I'm like, you know, and how do you deal with that? And I thought it was amazing because you just cut all the, you know, the external things out and you just went straight to the bottom line. And it's interesting. And, you know, listening to both of you now, I realize that you're both talking about a very similar concept, but in just a little bit different ways. But it's something that's, I think, very important to mention. And I think you mentioned it in your book about the concept of, in Hebrew, it's called tzimtzum, which means to belittle yourself in order to be able to be a vessel to receive more. And Michal, when you mentioned about writing your book and having to bring personal experiences in and kind of like putting yourself, you know, out there for everyone to see your fears and struggles before you dealt with them. In you, Sarah, in your book, you mentioned also the idea of tzimtzum in order to be able to see a bigger picture. So maybe you both can elaborate on that a little bit on, maybe Sarah, maybe you start how you dealt with it in your book and to explain about the concept through Tanya.
All right, is your book selling in the UK as well as the US?
I don't think it's gotten officially to the UK in terms of distribution, but there is somebody in England who has it. I sent it to SD Hamilton. I did an Instagram live with her, so she has it. Okay. But we gotta get it there. Yeah. But it's very interesting because you spoke about, I guess, transcending yourself. And what I've learned, you know, from the spiritual truths of Tanya and Hasidus is that actually I'm at my healthiest when I get over myself. That when I'm thinking about myself all day, that actually, when I'm just trapped by my ego and blinded by my ego, that's the beginning of the end, so to speak. I'm depressed, I'm sad. You know, somebody once wrote a letter into the Lubavitcher Rebbe and said, I'm struggling with depression and I'm having such a hard time and I'm so sad. And the Rebbe circled the I, the I, the I, the I. Because when my whole identity is my animal soul, my ego, myself, that pulls me down. But the more I shift to identify with my godly soul, with something bigger than me, with what God wants, with what the world needs from me, I actually become healthiest, both spiritually and emotionally, and they're very closely connected. You know, the soul of a Jew is our psyche. So you can't separate it. If I'm going to be doing better spiritually, it will impact me emotionally as well. So in terms of the book, in terms of, you know, that underlying theme, it's getting over myself, not taking myself so seriously, and instead focusing on, you know, what God needs for me. And Michal, it was so heartwarming when we spoke before this recording, and you said, you know, I'm here to help you. And I was like, wow, that is such a helpful, giving, kind, and healthy response when you look at life by how much you could contribute and what your purpose is.
That's amazing.
I think I have I would say not different perspective, but I came to it from a different angle. So my book is not a religious book. It's a self-help book. And I've written it to anyone and everyone that wants to grow and heal, Jews, non-Jews, people of faith, people of like anyone and everyone really that wants to learn something new about this universal Jewish wisdom, which could be applied, you know, by anyone that is curious enough. And what I found interesting about the idea of tzimtzum, of condensing yourself, is this idea of how we often take too much space, even within a context of a social context. I can say that sometimes I find myself talking too much.
I could relate.
Not making space for other voices, maybe less confident voices, or voices that are more, that need to be welcomed rather than push themselves in, which I am maybe naturally more geared to do. So this idea of tzimtzum, of condensing yourself and making more space, I think it's more space for other people, for new ideas, for curiosity, for forgiveness, all of those things that may sometimes feel uncomfortable. So we're taking space so we don't need to do those things. And that's why I think many ideas in Chassidut are so spiritual and so psychological, because it helps you understand what you tend to do, right? What makes you, which is the neshama, of course, and everyone has a neshama. Yes. And how can you get familiar with your neshama, with your soul, and then make the most out of it? So I fell in love with the discovery that everyone and each of us have a soul. I had no idea I had a soul.
Wow. It's like suddenly uncovering like the best version of you that could be, the part of you that's unlimited, that's happy, that's joyful, that's calm. It's literally, it's like plugged into God himself. It's a piece of God. A lot of times I think we women are really good at beating ourselves up, or thinking negatively of ourselves, or not feeling we're good enough. But the more I identify with this soul, then the more confident I could be, the more I'm going to identify with, I have this unstoppable energy. So what if I make mistakes? Or so what if sometimes I have a negative thought? That's okay. That's not the important part. The important part of me is the soul who, like you said, forgives, can make space, is understanding. And I'm not creating something new. I'm revealing what's inside of me. I have it. I have this ability. And so do you, anyone who's watching. Every single one of us can tap into this, spiritual energy boost at any time.
That's amazing. Again, as I'm listening to both of you, I'm learning so many things about both of your books that are even more similar than I realized, because in Michal, in your book, I see that you have like messages. You're constantly saying, think about this and that. How would you deal with that? And you're giving tips, kind of like even giving space to people. And the same thing with you, Sarah, your book is based basically on meditations. So I was hoping maybe we can discuss with the viewers today a little bit about meditations, about actually taking the time to think about concepts and not just moving on to the next thing, to really sitting for a second and writing about it or meditating on it and a thought. So maybe each one of you can explain to us a little bit in your view how you structured your book in a way that's actually a tool that you can use and actually do things on an everyday level that can really improve our lives.
I want to learn about meditation because I don't know much, if I'm honest. I am so wanting to start practicing meditation, and breathing actually would be a really good start. So I definitely can't comment on that, but I know that's not what you're asking, Sheli. Very briefly, I cared very much about bringing things to practice. And I ended every chapter in the book saying, if you change nothing, nothing will change, which is an Albert Einstein quote. But it is about the tachlis, right? Okay, beautiful ideas, spiritual, all those things that we're kind of sharing here. But I have to wake up in the morning and I have to do a million things, and someone's annoying me and someone's rude to me, and I don't know why I'm even here, and I'm not, all of those things. And what I was trying to do in the end of each chapter is to give some practice tools, almost like a coaching section. How can you bring these ideas to life? For example, we spoke about the soul. I think that if I went out to do like a street poll survey and I asked people, do you have a soul? Anyone, everyone on a London, high street, a good 90%, maybe 80% or more would say, yeah, I have a soul. But then if I would ask them, so what's your soul all about? What's the unique essence of the unique one time in this world soul that you have? People will probably say most times, I don't know, right? So let's say in the end of the chapter around the soul, I ask people to take a minute, and maybe I can start using more kind of meditation tools to really start being curious about, so what what is your soul story? You know, be mindful of how do you react to situations? What gives you energy and what does not? What are the places that you go to and you feel like, oh my gosh, I was born to be here in this place with these people. But what are the places that, or the people that you're with and you're feeling, I shouldn't be here. This is not good for me. So just trying to bring those tools so people can develop their awareness and also take action on how they live their life. And one of the things I loved about spiritual Judaism, when I thought about this anxiety that I was struggling with for many, many years, and I'm not saying that I'm completely over it, I'm just dealing with it in a much more effective way, is that sometimes the only way of our soul to signal to us that something's not working in our soul's life, in us, is by us feeling bad.
Yes.
And, you know, to listen to ourselves is sometimes to listen to how we're feeling and to wonder, you know, maybe there's something deep, deep, deep in how I'm treating myself and living my life, that if I adjust it even a little bit, I'll start feeling those feelings that Sara, you described before, because at the moment, many of us are not feeling that boost of energy and that positivity for all sorts of reasons. So that's why I'm trying to bring a lot of tachlis in the book as well. But tell me about meditation.
Okay. So I want to focus on a specific aspect of meditation. If you look in the dictionary, it talks about focusing on an idea, usually for spiritual purposes. And remember, I wrote the book for women, for busy women, for women who don't necessarily have time. And what I've learned in my life is that it could be even 60 seconds. It could be even 1 minute. But if I dedicate it to meditating, and the Alter Rebbe in the Tanya gives practical examples of things to meditate about, I will be generating positive emotions, because we don't fight negative emotions. I can't tell the depression go away. I can't tell the fear go away. What I could do is generate positive emotions. And that's an underlying theme in the Tanya, is that what you think about will give birth to little emotions. I think of it like, you know, he calls it kids. Think of these little emojis. And for me, that was the most healing and the most helpful to recognize that if I take a minute, if I take my walk to school, and this is my favorite time of day to actually consciously meditate, and I'll give some examples, I will feel better for the entire day. It will impact me emotionally. And sometimes I do find that if there's a day where I'm more worked up or I'm feeling the tension more, I didn't give my brain the soul food that it needed. And in Chassidut, meditation isn't about emptying our mind as much as what are we choosing to fill our mind with. And I've spoken to Sheli about this a lot. We meditate all day without realizing it. Our mind is constantly in full gear. So either I'm going to be not consciously meditating. What does that mean? Again, going by the definition of thinking in depth about being afraid of something that I want, that I don't have, getting hurt or offended. Without realizing it, we could be meditating about how toxic or negative or unhealthy somebody is, or something that they said to us. And then we're left with just almost like the emotional throw up, the emotional negative, we're stewing in it. So the only way I could change that is by consciously choosing to think godly thoughts, and then I will experience those emotions. So I'd love to share my favorite meditations that I like to think about. And once what I was shocked by was how simple they were. You think love of God is like this really esoteric thing that maybe, a rabbi who prays for 6 hours a day can access. But the Alter Rebbe breaks it down in the Tanya so simply. And then when you do it, you're like, oh, I could do that. So here's one of my favorite ones. It's called Ahavat Olam, love of the world. And we could do this now because it doesn't take long. Think of somebody or something that you love. It could be anything. It could be pizza, it could be a family member, it could be a hobby, it could be music, it could be... Now, think about it until you feel the love in your heart, because you always love, let's say, your child, but you weren't thinking about him a second ago, so then you didn't feel that love in your heart. So think about something or someone until you feel that love in your heart. So I'm, let's say, thinking about my 4-year-old child right now. He's my cutie. He still climbs into my bed at night. So, if it helps, you can close your eyes, but when I think of him and him coming over and just being like, Mommy, can I give you a hug? I'm like melted. I could actually feel that love and passion in my heart when I think about it. So I could start off thinking about what I already love, because God created us that we love. It's an emotion. The Alter Rebbe says, now think about the creator of whoever gave you that thing. By feeling human love, ahavat olam, you could then transfer it to love of God. And this is my favorite meditation because I just said it to you, but then you can do it. Michal, are you brave enough to should we give ourselves 60 seconds to go through that process? Let's do this. Take ourselves from bringing the love up in our heart to transferring it, that level and that degree of love, to God. And when I think about that, it's deeper than just, oh, I'm grateful. I could actually feel a love of God in my heart, like it says in the Shema, b'chal levacha, with your whole heart, because I love. And who's the giver of that? Who created that? God. So love of God is so close. So let's do it. Let's give ourselves time to really experience this.
I did it already. No, give time. You said we're busy women, so we do as you were speaking. I was like,
as you were speaking. So let's hear it. Michal, is it close to you? Is feeling love for God a possible human emotion? We can do that.
I'm sure it is. I think I don't know about 60 seconds, but I completely understand the kind of, I actually love the first bit, which is reflecting on a person or something that you like and you love, which is just as itself such a beautiful experience.
It is. It is. I think then it depends also. Sometimes I'm not used to thinking as a given that God created everything. You know, the same way children have a very hard time understanding, like, you know, my 4-year-old is grappling with this. Like, what do you mean everything's from God? Like, you built the house. What do you mean it's from God? It could be there's underlying work to uncover my relationship with God. You're right. It could be it's longer than 60 seconds if I'm not used to the assumption that everything that I have is from God. It could be that I need to think about that.
Do your kids meditate? I'm curious. Do you do that with the children?
Maybe not enough, but I have seen something fascinating. The other Shabbat, my 4-year-old, this little cutie of mine, decided he did not want to make a blessing on his tzitzit. I don't want to.
Sarah, maybe tell what a tzitzit is for viewers that don't know what it is.
Sure. So it's one of the commandments that Jewish boys and men wear. If you ever see these strings, these fringes that hang out off people's pantses, and there is a commandment to make a blessing on it. So he was wearing the garment. It's a 4-cornered garment with strings. And the Jewish law is if you're wearing a 4-cornered garment, then it has to have these strings. And there's a blessing to make. It's an opportunity to connect to God. And he said, I don't want to. And I looked at him and I said, Samach, your neshama, your soul would love to. It would make it so happy. There's a part of you that's not in the mood, but you have a part of you that would love to do it. And guess what? He did it. So I didn't call it a meditation, but when I bring up the awareness that there's a part of you that really, really wants to do beautiful things and connect to people, like you said, to love, to God, to transcend itself, it's very appealing even to a child. Even a child can understand that.
Well, children their self-awareness could surprise us.
By the way, as you're talking, I'm realizing that I've read all of Sarah's children's books because I also, deal with children sometimes, and your books did bring a lot of the Tanya meditation into it, which is interesting. So it's like you might have not had, I think that maybe Close to You came out somehow after this process of educating children. Probably, you brought this to us, to women, to adults out there. But really, it's interesting that you really did start with the children when it comes to this. So you might have not called it meditations, but really your books portray some of these concepts.
Right. And I want to say something. You said something before about breath work, and it's very interesting because neshama, which is the Hebrew word for soul, is the same word as nishima, breath. And breath work is very connected. God breathed our soul into us. So learning how to regulate our breathing and focusing on, you know, it's so closely connected to our soul. It's so, it just fascinates me constantly how, you know, the awareness of our emotional and spiritual health is just so, like we mentioned it before, there's just this huge overlap. And that's because God made us. You know, there's a blueprint here. It's like the creator of any technical device would make it and know how to optimize it and know how it should function in the best manner. When we internalize spiritual ideas, and like you said, universally, when we internalize spiritual ideas universally, we are at our optimal. So that meditation might not have connected to you, and maybe another one would. Maybe, you know, it could be you would connect to something else. I shared my favorite, but it could be you would connect to something else. And I invite you to explore, you know.
I actually thought it was a very nice practice to think about my husband for 60 seconds.
Shalom bayit is a Jewish virtue too.
Very, very nice.
Michal, since we were talking about education in your book, you mentioned a few concepts about motherhood and about children being an empty canvas, and about the concept of container. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit, and how does that connect with dealing with our fears?
I think, well, there's quite a bit in the book, I guess, on parenting and being a leader of a family, I guess. I was very fascinated by King Solomon's parental advice about raising a child by their soul, which was very different to how I studied, let's say, psychology or psychoanalytical thinking in the academia, I guess. And when I studied, I was very much, you know, advised to believe that a child is born neutral, tabula rasa, you know, a clean slate, a blank canvas, however you call it, and that actually whatever turns out from your child is because of how you were with them, which is quite scary and really evokes a lot of anxiety, because you're so afraid to make a mistake. Anything I get wrong will affect, you know, my child in the future. And learning from King Solomon that a child is born with a story, with a neshama, with their essence, with their soul, and that as parents we're here to guide and to give good advice, but we cannot project our own hopes and dreams and everything onto them, because eventually they're going to go back to who they were supposed to be in the first place. I'm not saying it's easy to play mainly the role of the guide, you know, the guiding parent and the educating parent, but I do believe that eventually they are who they are. And I do hear from parents who are maybe slightly disappointed at the moment or not very happy with the journeys and the decisions that their children are taking. And I know it's tough, but at the same time, there's something quite encouraging to know that we can only do as much as we can. And we cannot control everyone and everything, which is one of the first lessons, I guess, in Jewish wisdom. You can control yourself, try to control your thoughts, what comes out of your mouth, your behavior, but can you control someone else's behavior and thought? And no.
Reminds me of a quote by Rabbi Sheli Atara Man. Or I heard it from him. He says, God has no grandchildren. We are all his children. You know, I think I need to be the intermediary, you know, between God and my kids. And I don't. You know, each one of my children will, like you said, will have their own journey, will have their own relationship, will develop, will explore, will think. And it's quite humbling to think that, you know, that I don't, but it's also it is comforting, because when I think I'm controlling the situation, it's like, there's a pressure, like there's a performance anxiety, and I let go. And I'm like, oh, I just need to do what I need to do in the moment, you know, the next right thing. And then the results are, you know, the effort's mine, the results are up to something bigger than me.
If I had to like sum it up from both of you, is really that from your book, Sarah, I would probably take that, you know, speak to children and you know, train them to think in a positive way. And for all of us to train ourselves to think in a positive way. So when we walk around all day and the thoughts we have in our head are the meditation that we are doing. So basically, if we think positive thoughts, we are meditating on good. And when we tell children things like that and to think that way first thing when they get up in the morning, then they start leading a life like that. And like you said, Michal, we can't control everything, but we can give children the tool to be able to have a better and more meaningful life. Now, I know you are both very busy women, so we're going to end up with just one last question and we're going to let everyone go on their day. So you're both very busy women. You wear many different hats. One advice for our viewers today, something that each one of you really values that you use in order to juggle all the things that you do. Michal, maybe we'll start.
Yeah, we're all doing our best, right? I think one of the things that I've let go of is this hope for balance. I know that there is this kind of work life, or at least was this work-life balance, phrase, and I actually don't buy into it that much. I prefer calling it work life or just life integration, which means that with all those different hats, as you said, Sheli, that we wear as daughters and sisters and community members and wives and mothers and workplace leaders and authors and many other things, I'm sure I'm not, granddaughters listing, women of faith, etc. We can't expect ourselves, and nor we should, to be doing all of those things all the time. And sometimes that means that we have to be very comfortable in our skin and very confident to say, well, now I'm doing less of something. To yourself even, you don't have to declare it, in order to do more or spend more time on something else. And I have to say, as someone that spends a good number of hours a day at work, I miss school things of my children. I miss some of their activities or celebrations or opportunities to do things. And, that could potentially make me feel guilty or upset or sad. But I remind myself that I have those different worlds that I love. And in order to operate in those different worlds, it means that sometimes I'm less in one world and more in the other. And then I try to compensate, but it's never going to be perfect because nothing is. So my tip and advice, and something that I feel really passionately about, also in the spirit of International Women's Day that we've been celebrating this month, is that it's more about an integration of the different parts of your life rather than balance. And if you're ordering takeaway, that's also fine.
I couldn't agree with you more, Michal. When I started hearing your question, it sounded like an either or thing. And to me, it's not like self versus kids, professional versus this. It's the model that I like to use is there's one thing in the center and everything revolves around that center. Everything, this is the Meaningful Life Center. What's at the core? Everything, my family is part of my mission statement. And so is, if I have a book in me, I believe that's also part of my mission statement. God wants me to do that too. And if if nature calls me and I need to paint, and that's where I love to meditate, in a park, feeling the sun on my face and thinking, wow, that's God recreating every single second, that those thoughts, it all revolves around the same center. So it's like, imagine there's a play. You have actresses, you have people doing the makeup, you have the props, you have all different people, but it's one play. So in my life, there's all the different pieces, but it's orchestrating one play. I'm living my life. I'm doing what God wants me to do in the moment. And this is also Jewish wisdom. Jewish wisdom is being present. That a pnimi, an internal person, which is like a compliment, a pnimi is someone that wherever he is or she, that's where I am. That's where I am fully. And like, I love the fact that you're so comfortable with yourself and with your presence. I'm here. This is my story. This is who I am. This is my soul. This is my challenges. This is my journey. This is where I'm at. And it all revolves, like a company that has a business statement, right? Like a mission statement. Like, does this fit? If this fits with the objective, it's good. So does this does this jive with your life, with my life? And everything can all be part of that same story.
Wow. I feel like I went through a really life improvement class right now. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for spending your morning with us. I urge you to buy both of these amazing books. We have Close to You, published by the Meaningful Life Center, and we have Michal Oshman's book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? They are both sold on our website on the meaningfullifecenter.com. and we have amazing resources for you. And ladies, thank you so much. This has been so meaningful. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend this time with us and to give some feedback to women and to everyone out there. Even though, you know, Close to You was geared for women, it's really for anyone. We have a lot of people are asking about it. It's so practical. Michal, your book has amazing questions to yourself. Both of these books are amazing resources, and thank you for giving us your wisdom and for sharing it with the world.
Thank you. And thank you to the MLC, the Meaningful Life Center, for all that you do. I mean, if that's my go-to place very often when I want to learn something new, when I want to get inspired. Well done, Sheli, you and the team, for all the hard work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, ladies.
Good. Have a good day, good morning, good evening, regardless of where you are in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, we forget, Michal, that you are in the UK.
In a different place. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day. Thank you.